Lock them down now. The Arkan Overseer's guttural command reverberated through the orbital station's command chamber, carried not by echo, but by the sharp crack of boots striking reinforced flooring as Dominion guards shoved Earth's delegates against the steel-paneled walls. Shackles snapped shut, the sharp hiss of containment doors sealed with mechanical finality. Jonas Mirek, Earth's senior economic envoy, struggled against the guard's grip, spitting out words meant to cut through fear. You'll regret this breach. A neutral summit is sacrosanct. His protest ended when the overseer raised a clawed hand and drove it down on the console, activating a feed that projected Earth's captured leaders across every channel. Each delegate's image flickered into living rooms, war rooms, and civilian halls back home. The betrayal was complete, not whispered in backroom politics, but displayed with ruthless certainty. In Earth's orbital command bunker, Commander Rook Dalen stood rigid before the displays. The chamber smelled faintly of machine oil and heated wiring, the air heavy with tension rather than sound. He heard the scrape of his own boots as he approached the consoles, the subdued breaths of his officers behind him. His eyes tracked the live feed, locking on Jonas Mirek's battered face. "Cut the channel," Dalen ordered quietly. His tactical officer, Adric Tovin, hesitated, his fingers hovering above the keys. "The planet needs to see what's happening," Tovin muttered. "They need leadership more than spectacle," Dalen replied, voice steady but edged with restrained fury. He leaned closer to the console, studying every flicker of Dominion posture, every tilt of the overseer's head. Each detail was a message: confidence, control, the arrogance of power that had rehearsed this moment for months. A Dominion guard shoved another envoy into the frame, wrenching his arm until bone cracked. The sharp snap was picked up by the feed, followed by the envoy's gasp. People watching across Earth would hear that sound in their bones. Dalen forced his own jaw to remain locked, refusing to show the tremor of rage building in his chest. Tovin turned toward him. "We need a response." Right now, Dalen's gaze hardened. Not a reaction. A response. If we flinch now, they own the tempo. He turned toward the staff arrayed behind him. The bunker was cold, the hum of air filtration constant, the taste of recycled oxygen bitter on his tongue. "Activate Caldera Protocol," he said, each word deliberate. Gasps rippled through the command floor. A younger lieutenant, pale beneath the bunker's harsh lights, whispered, "Sir, that's escalation beyond treaty allowance." "Treaty's already ash," Dalen cut him off. "Our delegates were seized under neutral flag." Every law we respected died with that breach. As orders cascaded through the bunker, the chamber filled with the rustle of uniforms, the metallic click of data cartridges sliding into consoles, the sharp keystrokes of officers preparing Caldera. Outside the bunker, orbiting debris fields disguised as derelict satellites began to stir. Generations of discarded husks shifted almost imperceptibly, nudged by guidance motors that had lain dormant for years. Each one carried more weight than any energy weapon could deliver, shaped for velocity and silence. The overseer's voice cut back through the feed as if mocking Dalen's preparations. "Earth will disarm. You will dismantle orbital defenses and surrender control of your fleets. Refuse, and your envoys die one by one." His words carried the confidence of a predator certain of its prey. Behind him, guards shoved Jonas Mirek to his knees. Dalen drew a slow breath. He felt the bunker's recycled air dry his throat, the lingering tang of metal from the vents, the vibration underfoot as reactors shifted power. He spoke not to the overseer, but to his men. "We answer carefully, or we answer nothing at all." Tovin's fist clenched at his sides. "They're broadcasting our humiliation to the galaxy. And the galaxy will watch something else before this ends," Dalen said. His tone did not rise, but it cut through the chamber with the weight of command. He knew the cost of hesitation, but he also knew the cost of rash fire. Strategy was not made for comfort. The overseer's claw signaled again, and a Dominion guard drew a slender blade across Jonas Mirek's neck. The envoy's gasp was audible, followed by the wet thud of a body collapsing out of frame. Blood spread across the floor in a sharp red pool, bright even against the steel. The feed remained active, showing the lifeless form as Dominion soldiers stepped over it like discarded refuse. Every officer in the bunker froze. Some lowered their eyes, others stared with fists clenched until their knuckles blanched. Dalen forced his own breath to remain steady. The room reeked of fear and anger, though no one spoke it aloud. He swallowed hard, tasting the bitterness of helplessness he refused to accept. Audric Tovan broke the silence first, voice rough. They just executed our lead negotiator. That's not a threat anymore. That's war. Dalen's eyes stayed on the blood-stained floor in the feed. His voice dropped, low and ironclad. Then let them understand what war with Earth means. The chamber erupted into motion. Commands echoed, consoles lit up with streams of data, and the low vibration of buried machinery beneath Earth's surface grew as dormant systems awoke. Officers relayed target vectors, engineers calibrated guidance protocols. In the distant orbital graveyards, the disguised debris aligned like soldiers stepping forward after decades of waiting. Dalen watched it all in silence, his hands clasped behind his back, nails biting into his palms unseen. He thought of Jonas Mirek, not as a statistic, not as a casualty of power, but as a man who had carried Earth's voice into negotiations and been silenced with brutality. That silence would now speak louder than any words. Sir, Tobin said quietly, vector alignment is confirmed. Caldera is online. Dalen nodded once, the motion sharp. He stepped back from the console, the air in the bunker thick with expectation, every breath loud in his ears. He looked across his staff, each man waiting for the next word. We don't fire yet. Let them feel the shift. Let them wonder if they've already gone too far. The overseer's face still glared from the display, arrogance fixed in his posture, claws resting on the console as if nothing on Earth could reach him. Dalen leaned toward the display, his shadow falling across it. His voice, calm yet cutting, was carried on the secure line the overseer knew would reach him directly. You think you hold Earth in your fist, Dalen said, but every hand can break when it closes too tightly. The overseer snarled but offered no reply. The channel cut, the feed collapsing into static. The bunker was left with silence, broken only by the mechanical clatter of ongoing preparations. Dalen straightened, his shoulders heavy with the weight of lives already lost, and the ones that could yet be saved. This is where it begins, he told his men, not with surrender. With calculation, he stepped away from the displays, the sound of his boots sharp against the floor, carrying the weight of choices that would decide not just the survival of the envoys still shackled in orbit, but the fate of humanity's place among the stars. Target the depot, Rook Dalen commanded, his tone flat but cutting like a blade. His words snapped every head in the bunker toward him. Fingers paused over consoles. Eyes flicked to each other with the silent question of whether they had heard him correctly. Audric Tovan broke the stillness first, leaning across the table where data streamed across the laser plasma displays. That strike will be seen across the system. There'll be no pulling back afterward. His voice was tight, not in doubt, but in grim acknowledgement. That's the point, Dalen answered. He moved closer to the central display, its glow painting harsh lines across his face. The air in the room was heavy with the stench of overheated wiring, recycled oxygen sharp against the back of his throat. The Dominion paraded our envoy's death for the galaxy to see. Now we show them Earth answers with forced technicians set to work at once, the crack of keys and the clatter of cartridges sliding into ports filling the chamber. A soft vibration thrummed through the floor as dormant systems woke. The screen mapped orbital debris shifting position, hundreds of objects once thought to be the forgotten husks of satellites. Every orbit recalculated, every trajectory shifting into alignment. To the Dominion, it would look like cosmic trash drifting. To Dalen and his men, it was a slumbering arsenal opening its eyes. Impact vector locked, a lieutenant announced, sweat dripping from his brow. His uniform collar was dark with dampness as he spoke louder, forcing confidence into his tone. Rod 27 aligning with asteroid cluster 71. Execute, Dalen ordered. On the display, one of the massive tungsten spears detached from its cradle of debris and began its descent. Gravity pulled it down, speed mounting until numbers climbed faster than eyes could follow. The room fell silent except for the crisp reports of telemetry. The bunker lights seemed harsher in the waiting stillness, breathing louder, each heartbeat a hammer. "Impact in 20, the operator called, his voice hoarse. 10, 5. The display erupted in light as the rod tore into the Dominion supply depot. Rock and alloy vaporized, fire flaring brighter than the sun for a brief instant before the image cleared into a storm of fragments scattering through the asteroid belt. Gas filled the bunker, some men instinctively flinching as if the shockwave had reached them here beneath Earth's crust. Tovan exhaled, rubbing his temple with a trembling hand. "One depot gone. They'll know we've been preparing for years." "Good," Dalen said, his eyes fixed on the rolling cloud of destruction. "They'll realize we're not prey." Before the crew could catch their breath, the Dominion broadcast cut through again. The overseer's face glared from the plasma screen, scaled jaw tight, eyes narrowing to cold slits. Behind him, the delegates knelt in chains, bruised and bloodied. The overseer's claws tapped slowly against the console before him, each click amplified as if to grind against Earth's nerves. "You call that strength?" the alien commander hissed. His guttural words scratched across the feed. "For every depot you destroy, one of your envoys will bleed. For every rock you throw, a voice of Earth will be silenced." He snapped his hand, and guards dragged an envoy forward, forcing him onto his knees. The man's chest heaved, his lips cracked as he tried to speak, but no words came. A blade hovered above his throat. "Cut the transmission," Dalen barked. The screen went dark, leaving the chamber cloaked in tense silence. One officer slammed his fist against the table, rattling metal cups. "They're daring us to break. If we push again, they'll slaughter them all." "They already will," Dalen said, voice low but unyielding. "If we bend, they'll drag it out until submission is written into every treaty. Better to fight with terms we control." Tovan turned sharply, anger sparking in his voice. "And what terms are those, Commander? Do we gamble with every envoy's life while the Dominion watches our desperation?" Dalen stepped closer, his presence towering, his eyes fixed with unwavering intensity. "We gamble nothing. We calculate. We strike where it cuts their strength but spares our own. Every move will remind them that Earth doesn't kneel. Jonas Mirek's death isn't the end of this. It's the measure of what surrender costs." The officers stared at him, some biting their lips, others gripping consoles hard enough for knuckles to whiten. They all knew the overseer's threat was not empty. Every man in that bunker carried the image of Mirek bleeding out in their memory, and now they carried the weight of those still alive, waiting for the next decision to determine whether they breathed another hour. Dalen turned back to the operators. "Keep Caldera rods in shifting vectors. Never predictable. They must see that every orbit could be the next hammer." "Aye, Commander," the operator replied, his voice steadier now. Lines of trajectory streamed across the display again, crisscrossing the map like a web that grew tighter with every adjustment. Tovan's jaw clenched. He studied the display, then spoke in a quieter voice. "You're turning the station into a trap. Not for them, for us." Dalen did not deny it. His voice stayed calm, cold, deliberate. "Every trap works both ways. The difference is who walks out of it afterward." The bunker buzzed with renewed urgency. Reports streamed in, status updates fired across channels, every man working under the shadow of what had just been set in motion. The air grew warmer with the heat of overworked machines, the faint sting of sweat dripping into eyes, the constant taste of metal on the tongue from recycled oxygen. Dalen stood in the center, unmoving, as if his stillness anchored the storm. His thoughts circled the image of Mirek's body on the floor, the overseer's smirk, the helpless faces of the envoys still bound. Each memory hardened into steel in his chest. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of that steel into the room. "Every envoy chained on that station will know we did not abandon them. Every Arkan watching will know their threats bought them nothing but fire. And when this is over, every man here will know we carved humanity's place not with begging, but with force." The officers answered with nods, their fear reshaped into grim determination. The Dominion had forced the game onto their terms, but Earth had just shown its hidden cards. Caldera was awake, and the overseer would soon learn that every threat carried a cost he had not anticipated. and Dallin knew this was only the opening move. "Open channel now," the overseer barked, his guttural voice tearing across the Dominion cruiser's command deck. Guards scattered at once, claws clattering on steel plates as the main console lit with Earth's signal. The Arcan commander leaned forward into the glow, his scaled features stretched taut with fury. "Your strike was nothing more than vandalism," he hissed, the sound like stone dragged across stone. "And you will pay for it with the breath of every envoy you sent here." Inside Earth's bunker, Rook Dalen stood tall as the Umadam. Overseer's image burned across the laser plasma display. The alien's eyes gleamed with cold amusement, his claws tapping rhythmically against the console as though marking time until another throat was cut. Behind him, the chained delegates knelt in lines, bruised and exhausted, their clothing stained with sweat and blood. The overseer dragged one of them forward, jerking him into the feed. The envoy's lips split under the sudden strike, blood trailing down his chin. Dalen leaned toward the feed, his own voice controlled, deliberate. "You've already made a mistake. You think public executions will weaken us, but they do the opposite. You've turned your hostages into martyrs. Every death you show makes our retaliation broader." The overseer's teeth bared in something close to a grin. "Then watch closely," he signaled with a claw. Two guards shoved the envoy against the floor, forcing his cheek onto the steel plating. The overseer's blade hovered above his throat. "Cut transmission," Dalen ordered sharply. The image vanished, leaving only the murmur of cooling fans and the rattle of men shifting uneasily in their seats. Tovan slammed a fist against the console, rattling its frame. "He's playing us. Every time we strike, he threatens more." His chest rose and fell with ragged breath, sweat slicking his temple. "Not playing us," Dalen corrected, his voice level but cold. "He's revealing his doctrine. Intimidation is their only lever. Break it, and they have nothing left." He turned, scanning the bunker. "Begin signal warfare protocols. Deploy tug drones to sweep across Dominion channels." Operators moved at once, voices clashing as commands flew. The chamber filled with the sharp clatter of keystrokes and the whir of generators, kicking power into the drones scattered through orbit. Salvage craft disguised as derelict hulls blinked alive, their transmitters throwing up waves of disruption. Not strong enough to overwhelm Dominion systems outright, but targeted at narrow frequencies their cruisers relied upon for tight beam coordination. The main display erupted with data streams, interference slashing across Dominion patterns like cracks through glass. "Channels scattering," reported a comms officer, his voice strained with excitement. "Their cruisers' bands are dropping into static pockets. Orders will arrive seconds late at best." Tovan allowed a thin smile, but his expression remained dark. "Seconds can be fatal in battle." The overseer's retaliation came swiftly. Dominion guards paraded the envoys across the station, beating them in front of cameras, dragging them by their wrists through corridors as if they were trophies. The feeds poured into Earth's networks despite interference. Each delegate's suffering splashed across civilian channels. Families cried in their homes, soldiers gritted their teeth in silence, and men in the bunker clenched fists so hard blood welled under their nails. Dalen studied the images without blinking. Every bruise, every broken bone, every scream transmitted through grainy footage was burned into his memory. His hands folded behind his back, nails biting into his palms. He refused to look away, even as officers turned their heads. "Sir," a young lieutenant said, his voice trembling, "the people are demanding action. They've seen enough of this brutality." Dalen turned, his eyes locking onto the young man. "And they will get action." But not at the overseer's pace. Tobin stepped closer, lowering his tone so only Dalen could hear. "If he spaces them, Commander, none of this matters. Caldera, drones, all of it. It won't bring them back." Dalen's gaze stayed locked on the dark screen. If he does, then the overseer loses his only leverage. It ends his game. He knows that. He'll posture until the last second, but he won't extinguish them all unless we force him into a corner. Tobin's jaw clenched, but he gave a sharp nod. "So we keep pressure measured, not reckless." "Exactly," Dalen said. His voice dropped lower, gravel thick in his throat. Every move must remind him he's already bleeding control. The bunker lights flickered as the system rerouted power, the sharp tang of burnt dust drifting through vents. Men coughed but stayed at their posts, fingers flying across consoles. The constant sound of clicking keys mixed with the occasional sharp buzz of alarm updates, filling the chamber with a chaotic rhythm of urgency. Suddenly, a new feed blinked alive. Dominion guards marched a delegate toward an airlock, chains clinking, breath ragged, eyes wide with panic. The overseer's voice thundered, "Disarm your weapons, Earth, or your men will die gasping in the dark." The chamber erupted with shouts, officers cursing under their breath. One slammed his headset against the console. The young lieutenant who had spoken earlier stepped forward, his eyes wild. "We can't just stand here." "He's about to vent him into space." Dallin raised a hand, stilling the room. His voice came calm, controlled, each word carried like iron. "If we break now, he wins. Every envoy dead after this will be because we bent." He stepped toward the screen, the glow cutting across his face. "Transmit a message back. Tell him Earth acknowledges the execution of Jonas Mirek as an act of war, and tell him every further death will bring more fire down on his dominion." Tobin stared, eyes narrowing. "That's escalation beyond anything yet." "It's clarity," Dallin said. His shoulders squared. "If he believes our hand is still tied, he'll keep pulling until the arm snaps. We show him we're ready to tear the rope apart instead." The order was carried out, the message sent. The overseer's image flashed back onto the display minutes later, his scaled features twisting, his claws scraping harshly across the console. He snarled into the channel. "You threaten us while your envoys kneel before my blades." Then watch the next throat open, but the blade did not fall. The overseer's claw froze in midair as his comm feeds broke into static once more. Earth's drones were eating at his timing, disrupting coordination with his guards. His delay was enough for Dalen to see it, the hesitation, the flicker of uncertainty. He turned back toward his men, his voice carrying enough force to drive through their fatigue. "You see that? He hesitates because we cut his control. That's how we win. Not through desperate gestures, but by making him doubt every order he gives." The men straightened in their seats, their anger cooling into a harder, sharper focus. They had seen the overseer's mask crack, even for a second. It was enough to plant resolve where despair had been creeping. Dalen folded his arms behind his back, eyes fixed on the feed as static swallowed the Dominion's image. The overseer thought intimidation was victory. Tonight he learned that Earth could answer fear with fire and silence with disruption. The game had shifted, and Dalen intended never to give the alien commander the rhythm again. "Launch the infiltration teams," Rook Dalen ordered. His tone cut through the bunker like steel striking stone. Men scrambled at once, voices rising over the layered thrum of machinery, waking above ground. Heads-up displays flickered across the walls, streams of data pouring in from orbit. Every officer in the chamber knew what this order meant. They weren't moving drones or tungsten rods anymore. They were sending men into the jaws of a Dominion-controlled station. Adric Tobin turned to face him, shoulders tense, eyes glinting with restrained doubt. "Commander, those shuttles won't survive a direct approach. Their sensors will see through every decoy." "They won't be approaching directly," Dalen replied. He moved closer to the glowing display, his hands slicing through the air as he traced orbital paths. "Our supply convoys break apart debris every month. The overseer has grown accustomed to watching broken panels drift into his blind spots. We'll bury our teams inside that clutter. By the time he realizes, they'll already be at his door." Operators relayed the commands, their voices taut with urgency. Above the planet, disguised corvettes peeled from orbit, their frames massed in fragmented plating and slagged hulls stripped from Earth's scrapyards. From a distance, they looked like tumbling refuse, indistinguishable from the fields already littering space. Inside one of the insertion crafts, Cornvay braced himself against the wall as the shuttle shuddered. Sweat slicked his palms inside his gloves. His team sat in silence, helmets sealed, rifles strapped to their chests. The recycled air tasted faintly of copper and dust. A vibration rolled beneath their boots as maneuvering thrusters spat corrective bursts. Vay glanced at his second-in-command, Deimos Arid. whose jaw worked as if grinding stone. "When we breach, we move fast," Vey muttered into comms. His voice was low but steady. "The Dominion won't give us a second chance." Arid's nod was sharp. "We carve a path, or we don't come back." Back in the bunker, Dallin tracked the approach with eyes that refused to blink. His throat ached with dryness, his chest tight. He spoke only once to Tovin. "Every man we send knows the cost. We make sure it isn't wasted." The first shuttle drifted into range, masked by debris spinning off the supply convoy. The Overseer's cruiser loomed in the distance, its armored bulk glinting faintly against starlight. The station rotated slowly beneath it, lights dotting its surface like watchful eyes. Then the Dominion reacted. Beams of light streaked outward, cutting through the debris. Fragments shattered and spun into smaller shards, scattering like glass across the void. One corvette erupted under the strike, a blossom of fire bursting outward before silence swallowed it. 20 men were gone in an instant, their bodies scattered into the black. The bunker filled with sharp intakes of breath. One officer cursed under his breath, fists slamming against the console. Dallin's jaw clenched, but his voice came steady. "Log the loss. Track the survivors." The second shuttle twisted through the wreckage, scraping past torn panels and jagged beams. Its hull scraped sparks against metal, the vibration rattling the men inside like teeth clattering against bone. Vey's team hit the hull of the station with a thud that echoed in their bones. Magnetic clamps locked, their boots sealing with heavy snaps. The airlock cutter spat sparks into the corridor beyond. The smell of scorched alloy filled their helmets, sharp and stinging. The circle of metal fell inward with a screech. "Go!" Vey shouted. His men poured through the breach, rifles raised, eyes darting through shadows. The corridor was narrow, lined with piping that rattled under their weight. The Dominion response was immediate. Gunfire tore down the hall, sizzling streaks gouging black scars into the walls. Arid dove behind a conduit, shouting over comms. "Left flank suppressed. Move forward now." The Marines surged, boots slamming against the deck, weapons cracking with bursts that drowned out the groan of straining supports. Sparks rained from shattered lights overhead, the acrid sting of smoke filling their throats through their respirators. One soldier went down, chest plate scorched, his cry cut short. Another dragged him into cover, their gloves slipping on the blood soaking his armor. In the bunker, Dallin listened to the sharp bursts of comm traffic, every scream, every strained breath. He stood still, hands locked behind his back, nails digging crescents into his skin. The loss of men cut deeper than tungsten rods ever could. Yet he gave no outward sign of weakness. Tovan's voice broke through the noise. "2 teams down, only one breached." "They only needed one," Dallin answered, his eyes never leaving the feed. "Make sure they reach the delegates." Vey's unit pressed forward, fighting through narrow passages, muzzle flashes lighting the shadows in brutal staccato. Dominion guards fell hard, their armored frames crashing against walls, claws scraping as they died. The Marines advanced step by step, lungs burning, throats dry, the tang of iron and cordite thick in their mouths. They pushed into a maintenance shaft, darkness swallowing them as lights failed overhead. The sound of boots on rungs echoed upward as they climbed, breath ragged in helmets fogged with sweat. Vey forced himself upward, every muscle screaming, the weight of men lost behind him driving his resolve sharper. At last they reached a hatch, its seals corroded, its frame humming faintly with power. The cutter bit into it, sparks spitting against armor. The circle of metal clattered inward, and stale air gusted into their faces. Inside, the envoys huddled in chains, eyes wide with shock as the Marines poured in. Their clothes were torn, their skin mottled with bruises. One man whispered, his lips cracked and bleeding. "Are you real?" Vey's voice was hoarse but firm. "We're here to take you home." A wave of relief washed over the captives, though fear still lurked in their eyes. They knew the fight wasn't over. Dominion sirens blared overhead, the vibration shaking dust from the ceiling. The Overseer's voice roared through the station, guttural and furious. "You dare breach my walls? Then all of you die here." The corridor outside erupted with gunfire, heavier than before, the sound rattling the air with thunder. Marines shoved the envoys behind cover, rifles barking as they fought to hold the narrow choke point. Sparks danced across armor, smoke curled through the vents, the floor slickened with blood. In the bunker, Dallin stood unmoving, listening to the storm unfold in his ears. The Overseer had unleashed his fury, but the breach was made. The envoys touched freedom's edge, and Earth's hidden hand was finally inside the Dominion's fortress. "Hold that corridor!" Corin Vay's voice roared above the deafening rattle of gunfire, his words slicing through the chaos like a whip. Sparks burst from shattered conduits overhead, showering the Marines crouched behind cover. The station shook under the weight of the firefight, every wall echoing with the shriek of ricochets. Dominion guards poured rounds down the passage, their snarls carrying through the clash of steel and fire. Damos Arid slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, his hands trembling from both adrenaline and exhaustion. "We can't stay pinned here," he shouted, teeth bared in strain. "They'll bury us if we don't move." Vay leaned against the edge of a smoking bulkhead, catching his breath as heat clawed at his throat. He wiped blood from his brow, his own or someone else's. He couldn't tell. "We don't move until the envoys are clear," he snapped back, then swung out, rifle cracking as two Dominion soldiers crumpled under his fire. Behind them, the rescued delegates huddled low against the floor, chains still rattling around their wrists. The stench of sweat and fear clung to the air, mixed with the acrid bite of burning insulation. One envoy, his face gaunt from starvation, reached out and grabbed Arid's sleeve. His whisper was broken, almost pleading. "Don't leave us behind." Arid met the man's eyes, fierce despite the chaos. "We didn't come this far to abandon you." He shoved the envoy back toward cover as another blast rocked the corridor. Back in the bunker, Rook Dalen listened to the comms chatter. Every strained breath, every scream of pain, etched into his memory like scars. His officers relayed positions, updates, losses. The bunker stank of overworked circuits, the floor shivering under the weight of generators pulling maximum load. Audric Tovin stood at his side, jaw tight, eyes flicking across the laser plasma displays. "They're bleeding fast," Tovin said, his voice gravel. "2 men down in Vay's squad already. If they're cut off, we lose everything." Dalen's gaze stayed locked on the feed, his voice steady, though his gut twisted. "Then we don't let them get cut off. Prepare Caldera strike against the Dominion cruisers' forward hold. We cripple their supplies, not their throats. Show them we can strangle without slaughter." "Commander," Tovin pressed, "that strike will kill crewmen. Not drones, not cargo. Living soldiers." Dalen turned his head, his eyes cold. "And how many of ours have they killed already? How many more envoys do they threaten to cut down? Every choice is blood. The only question is whose." The order was executed. Above, a tungsten rod peeled from orbit, dropping faster than thought. The bunker shook as the strike hit the Dominion cruiser. The image on the display flared bright as the forward logistics hold ripped open, flames spewing into the black. Supplies spilled into nothingness, containers spinning wildly until they burst apart. Men aboard the Dominion ship scattered, some dragged into the void. The Overseer's channel erupted in static, his bellowing fury audible even through the distortion. Vay and his Marines felt the tremor through the walls of the station as the cruiser outside reeled. The Dominion soldiers hesitated, their firing stuttering for the first time. Vay seized the chance. "Push forward!" he yelled, rising from cover. His rifle barked in bursts as the squad surged, boots hammering the scorched deck. They crashed into the enemy line, rifles cracking, bayonets flashing in close quarters. Screams echoed as bodies fell. But the cost was immediate. A Marine to Vay's left dropped, chest plate smoking from a direct hit. Another screamed as a Dominion blade tore into his thigh, blood splattering across the wall. The Marines dragged him back, their hands slipping on the slick floor. In the bunker, a voice cracked across comms. "Casualties mounting. We're losing men faster than we can clear the halls." Tovan turned toward Dalen, his voice breaking. "We're burning through them." "How many more before we call retreat?" Dalen's hand gripped the edge of the console until his knuckles whitened. He could almost taste iron in his mouth, his body taut with fury he couldn't unleash. There is no retreat, he said, his words cold as steel. If we pull back, the overseer executes every envoy left. If we hold at least some live, Tovan's eyes burned with anger. But he said nothing more. He knew the commander was right, though the truth cut deeper than any wound. Inside the station, Arid crouched beside the envoys, his hand pressing against the wound of the Marine who had been cut down. Blood seeped through his gloves, warm and sticky. The man's breath came shallow, his eyes glassy. Arid whispered fiercely, "Stay with me. You're not dying here." The wounded Marine managed a faint smile, lips trembling. "Just get them home." His body sagged, the last breath slipping from him. Arid's teeth clenched, rage surging in his chest. He slammed his fist against the floor before grabbing his rifle and rising into the fight with renewed fury. The overseer's voice boomed through the station intercom, guttural and thunderous. "You kill my men, you burn my ships, but I hold the power here. Every envoy dies at my command." Vase snarled into his comm. "Tell Dallin if we're to carry these men out, we need the demolition circuits gone. If the overseer blows this station, none of us leave alive." Back in the bunker, Dallin's head turned sharply. His officers froze, every eye on him. He closed his eyes for 1 second, recalling intelligence smuggled months earlier by human contractors who had helped build the station's maintenance cores. Quiet back doors left behind, ignored by the Dominion, buried under layers of arrogance. "Relay access codes," Dalen ordered. His voice sharpened into command that brooked no doubt. "Target the demolition grid. Burn it out before the overseer can trigger." Operators scrambled, fingers flying across consoles, faces shining with sweat. The displays shifted, code strings racing, systems colliding. A spark flared from a console, the acrid bite of scorched plastic filling the bunker as circuits overloaded. Then the confirmation pinged. The demolition network was fried. Dalen exhaled once, the sound sharp in the tense room. "Now he's bluffing," he muttered, "and bluffs don't hold once they're exposed." Inside the station, Dominion guards surged again, desperate, feral in their attacks. Vay's men fought tooth and claw, the air hot with smoke, the floor slick with blood. The envoys cowered behind the Marines, eyes wide with terror as the fight raged inches from them. Every gunshot rang in their bones, every scream etched into memory. And yet, step by step, the Marines held. Bodies lay scattered, but the line advanced. Dallin listened from the bunker, silent, knowing each scream in his ear was another man lost to his orders. The cost was staggering, the weight crushing, but the breach had been carved, and the envoys still lived. "Fire the next rod now!" Rook Dalen's command thundered through the bunker, slicing through the noise of status calls and frantic voices. Operators reacted instantly, their hands striking keys in a frenzy. A tungsten spear detached from its orbital cluster, its descent tracked across the central laser plasma display. The room trembled faintly as power rerouted, every officer's face lit in the glow of streaking vectors. Audric Tovan gritted his teeth, sweat rolling down his temple. If this strike cripples their engines, the overseer won't have the mobility to keep the station covered. But if it misses, it won't miss, Dalen snapped, eyes fixed on the display. His tone left no room for hesitation. Above Jupiter, the rod plunged downward. Dominion shields flared bright under the impact, but the sheer weight tore through. The feed filled with blinding light as the overseer's cruiser shuddered, its aft section tearing open in a blossom of fire and venting atmosphere. Containers, weapon racks, even armored bodies spilled into space, dragged into the pull of gravity. The ship buckled, engines sparking, its once formidable bulk now sagging into a degrading orbit. In the bunker, the display cleared, showing the cruiser listing, emergency thrusters, coughing sparks as its control systems flailed. Officers erupted with shouts, some in triumph, others in disbelief. Tovan's voice carried over them all. "Commander, they've lost half propulsion. They're bleeding out." Dalen didn't smile. His voice was calm, his gaze unflinching. "They're wounded, not dead. And wounded predators fight hardest inside the station." The tremor from the strike shook corridors, dust drifting from the ceiling in thin veils. Marines stumbled but pressed forward, dragging envoys along as Dominion guards regrouped. Corin Vey shouted above the clamor, "Keep moving! That cruiser won't shield this place much longer." His throat was raw, every word scraping. Damos Arid fired down the passage, the flash of his rifle searing his retinas. The air reeked of scorched wiring and blood, thick and bitter. His voice rasped into comms. "2 more corners and we reach the evac shafts." One envoy stumbled, his chained wrists bruised from being pulled forward. He gasped, voice breaking. "I can't run. My legs!" His knees buckled. Vey grabbed him by the collar, hauling him upright with brute strength. His own muscles screamed, but he forced the man forward. "You'll move because dying here isn't an option. You understand me?" The envoy's terrified nod was enough. Gunfire thundered again. As Dominion troops surged, armor clanged against the deck, their guttural roars filling the hall. The clash turned brutal. Bayonets stabbed, blades clashed, fists struck where rifles jammed. Blood splattered walls, screams tangled with the screech of steel. The corridor became a furnace of violence. Back in the bunker, Dalen tracked the progression through grainy feeds. Every frame burned into his mind. "Marines are losing ground," a lieutenant reported, voice breaking. "If the Overseer rallies, they'll be crushed before reaching evac." Dalen's jaw tightened. He turned sharply. "Deploy microwave suppression across their corridors. Every Dominion weapon with exposed circuits will fry." Now generators groaned as the order carried. Satellites aligned, beams fired invisible waves into the station. Inside, Dominion rifles sparked and died, their soldiers snarling in frustration as their weapons went cold. Vey seized the advantage. "Push them now!" he bellowed. Marines surged forward, slamming rifle butts into armored jaws, stabbing knives into gaps. The envoys were hustled through, stumbling, crying out as the firefight pressed closer. The floor was slick with blood, each step treacherous. Arid's grip slipped on a wounded Marine's shoulder, the man's weight dragging him down. He roared, muscles straining, and forced him back to his feet. "You'll see Earth again," Arid swore. Meanwhile, on the crippled cruiser, the Overseer clawed at his console, his voice guttural with rage. "Stabilize engines! Bring weapons online!" His officers scrambled, scales glistening with sweat, but the ship groaned under every failed attempt. Fire spread across compartments, alarms wailed, and the Overseer's claws carved gouges into the console in fury. The Overseer switched channels, broadcasting again into the station's loudspeakers. "You think this victory means survival? You've sealed your fate. None of you leave alive." His words echoed through the corridors like venom, but his tone lacked the iron of earlier. Vey spat onto the floor, his voice hoarse as he growled back into comms. "Tell Dalen his bluff sounds weaker now that his ship is falling apart." In the bunker, Tovin allowed a bitter laugh, but Dalen raised a hand, silencing him. "We don't mock him yet. Desperate commanders kill more recklessly than calm ones. Keep Caldera rods in orbit. If he tries to turn that cruiser into a weapon, we erase it completely." The bunker smelled of scorched circuits and sweat-soaked uniforms, the air hot and stifling. Officers wiped their brows, some whispering prayers, others biting their lips until they bled. Dalen stood firm, the weight of every life balanced on his decisions. On the station, Marines dragged the envoys into an evacuation shaft. The chamber was tight, walls slick with condensation, the floor vibrating from distant impacts. One Marine forced the hatch open with a grunt, sweat dripping into his eyes. Cold. Air gusted in, tasting of dust and oil. The envoys gasped, clutching each other as if salvation lay beyond the steel doors. Arid checked his rifle, hands trembling from exhaustion. His voice was sharp as he addressed his men. "We hold this shaft until every last envoy is through. If we fall here, Earth loses more than soldiers. It loses its voice." Vey stood beside him, battered, blood streaking his cheek. He nodded, his tone fierce. "Then we hold." Gunfire erupted again, louder, closer. Dominion soldiers poured into the corridor, weapons sparking back to life as systems flickered under their engineers' frantic repairs. The Marines dug in, rifles roaring, knives flashing, the chamber filled with smoke, sweat, and blood, the clash deafening. In the bunker, Dalen's voice cut across the chaos, steady and cold. Every second they hold is another envoy free. Support them however you can. And when the Overseer watches his last hope slip away, he'll understand what Earth truly is. The Overseer's cruiser groaned louder, fire blooming across its hull. On Earth, men held their breath, their fists clenched, their eyes glued to the display. On the station, Marines fought with teeth and steel, dragging envoys toward the narrow light of escape. The Dominion was shattering, one strike, one corridor, one sacrifice at a time. Seal the hatch and move them! Corin Vey's voice tore through the evacuation shaft, ragged but commanding. Marines shoved envoys through the narrow passage, their boots splashing and blood pooled across the floor. The stench of sweat and burned insulation choked the air, thick enough to sting every breath. Muffled explosions rattled the steel walls, each shock wave flaking dust into their eyes and mouths. Damas Arid fired down the corridor, his rifle kicking against his shoulder, muzzle flashes strobing the smoke-filled hall. Dominion troops surged again, their guttural shouts blending with the shriek of charging blades. Arid's throat burned as he roared back to his men. "Cover left! Don't let them take this shaft!" His words came like fire, igniting those near him into action. A Marine to his side collapsed with a scream, his armor split open by an energy bolt. Blood gushed hot across Arid's gloves as he dragged the man back. The dying soldier gasped, eyes wild. "Get them out! Don't let it end here!" His hand twitched once before going slack. Arid pressed his forehead briefly to the man's helmet, then rose with teeth bared, fury flooding his veins. He emptied his rifle into the Dominion line until the weapon clicked dry. Back in Earth's bunker, the air was stifling with heat from overworked systems. The sharp reek of scorched plastic lingered as operators barked updates over one another. The laser plasma display blazed with feeds, chaotic streams of gunfire, falling bodies, and frantic movements in the shaft. Rook Dalen stood unmoving at the center, eyes narrowed, hands clasped tight, behind his back. His silence was heavier than any shout. Adric Tobin turned sharply toward him. "We're losing half the squad, Commander. They're buying time with their lives, but the Overseer's reinforcements are flooding in. If we don't break the cruiser's grip now, none of those men will reach the shuttles." Dalen's jaw worked as he forced down the taste of bile rising in his throat. "Then prepare Caldera for final barrage. Hit the cruiser again. Engines are crippled, but if it still has teeth, our men die caged." The order went out. In orbit, rods aligned like waiting executioners. A heartbeat later, another spear fell, slamming into the Dominion cruiser's aft cluster. The ship buckled, explosions ripping along its spine. Flames consumed compartments, the glow spilling through gashes in its hull. Gravity caught the wreck, dragging it toward Jupiter's pull. On the station, Dominion soldiers faltered as the tremor shook the walls. The overhead lights flickered, the vibration rumbling through boots and bones. Vey seized the moment, his voice raw as he shouted, "Advance! Push them back now!" The Marines surged in unison. Rifles cracked, knives plunged into joints, boots smashed armored throats. Smoke stung their eyes, sweat streamed down faces beneath helmets, and the copper taste of blood filled every mouth. Step by step, they forced Dominion guards backward, each clash a blur of screams and steel. Envoys stumbled through the hatch, coughing, eyes wide with terror. One fell to his knees, gagging, his voice breaking. "We can't make it. There's too much." Vey hauled him upright, his own chest heaving with exhaustion. "You'll walk if I have to drag you by the spine." His eyes locked on Arid. "Cover the rear." "Nobody follows us," and Arid slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, the click echoing in the chaos. He stood at the mouth of the shaft, firing burst after burst, his roar drowning the Dominion's guttural cries. Bullets tore through smoke and shadow, dropping enemies in heaps. Sparks rained from ruptured conduits, the heat baking against his armor until it scorched his skin beneath. Still he fired, each trigger pull fueled by rage and grief. Back in the bunker, one officer whispered hoarsely, "They won't all get out." The words carried despair, but Dalen's voice cut him down. "They get out because they have no choice," Dalen said, his tone carved from stone. Our men are holding that line so the envoys reach those shuttles alive. Don't dishonor that by speaking of failure while they bleed. The overseer's voice cracked across comms, guttural with venom. You drag your weak leaders toward escape, but you've trapped yourselves. My guards will cut them apart before the last one leaves. His snarl rattled through the station, but his words quivered with frustration. Tobin sneered at the display. He's bleeding too. He knows it. Dallin didn't look away from the screen. Desperate commanders kill to prove they're still in control. Watch him carefully. He'll overplay his hand. Inside the shaft, Marines shoved envoys into waiting shuttles. The air reeked of oil and blood, every surface slick with grime. Men gasped as they strapped themselves in, chains still rattling at their wrists. The cries of the wounded filled the cramped space, piercing over the hiss of hydraulic seals. Arid fired until his rifle clacked empty again. Dominion guards swarmed closer, blades raised. With no time to reload, he drew his knife. Teeth gritted as he slashed and stabbed, his world reduced to the stink of sweat and the scream of steel striking armor. One clawed hand raked across his shoulder, tearing flesh beneath the plate. He staggered but drove the blade into the guard's throat, hot blood spraying across his visor. "Corin!" Arid shouted, his voice breaking as he staggered back. "Get them out!" Now, Vey met his gaze through smoke and chaos. His voice was raw, torn between command and grief. "You fall back with us! Someone has to hold it!" Arid bellowed, his knife raised again, his body shaking from blood loss but his stance unyielding. "Go!" Marines dragged the last envoys into the shuttle as the hatch sealed. Vey's fist slammed against the door, his scream muffled as the chamber locked. Through the small viewport, he watched Arid vanish into the smoke. Rifle finally reloaded, his silhouette firing one last burst before Dominion troops closed in. The shuttle jolted free, thrusters roaring. Envoys sobbed in exhaustion, their chains clinking. Marines sat bloodied and silent, their eyes hollow. The image of Arid burned into memory. Back in the bunker, Dallin heard the hatch confirmation and released the breath he'd held. His eyes closed for a moment, then opened, cold and steady. "They made it," he said. His tone gave nothing away of the storm raging inside him. Tovin's voice cracked. "Not all of them." Dallin's gaze locked on the display of the collapsing Dominion cruiser, fire consuming its hull. "Enough survived to prove the Overseer wrong. That's the only measure that matters tonight." The cost was staggering, but the envoys were free, and the Overseer's empire had just been scarred by men who refused to bow, even if it meant standing their ground to the last breath. "Cut the Dominion channel," Rook Dalen ordered. His voice carried through the bunker with finality, silencing every echo of the Overseer's snarling threats. The operators obeyed without hesitation, and the displays went dark except for the feet of shuttles breaking away from the crippled station. Relief rippled faintly across the room, but no one celebrated. Men sat hunched in their seats, their uniforms drenched with sweat, their faces gaunt from the strain of hours spent listening to comrades die through open comms. Adric Tovin's voice was hoarse, his throat raw from shouting over chaos. "Commander, the envoys are clear. Half the team gave everything to hold that shaft, but the survivors are en route. They'll reach orbit within minutes." He swallowed hard before adding, "Arid never left the line." Dalen closed his eyes for a single second, his breath catching in his chest. Images of Arid holding the passage with nothing left but a knife burned into his memory. He opened his eyes again, locking them onto the glowing status map. He bought them the time they needed. That sacrifice will not vanish into silence. His words struck the bunker heavy as iron, spoken not with grief alone, but with the weight of command. Above Jupiter, the Dominion cruiser's wreckage glowed as it slipped lower into orbit, entire decks ruptured and burning. Emergency pods spat away like sparks flung from a fire, scattering into darkness. The Overseer's once dreaded ship had been reduced to drifting scrap, its fall visible to every observer across the system. Inside the shuttles, the rescued envoys sat slumped in their restraints, chains still rattling around their wrists. Their skin was pale, lips split, eyes haunted. Corin Vey sat among them, armor scorched, his hands still shaking from the last firefight. One envoy whispered, voice thin as air, "Are we safe now?" Vey's gaze hardened. Safe isn't the right word. Alive, yes. And alive is enough for today. His throat burned as he spoke, but the men around him nodded, clinging to that fragile truth. Back on Earth, the bunker buzzed with transmission requests. Every major government demanded answers. Every broadcast station begged for statements. Tovin leaned toward Dallin, exhaustion etched into his face. "The world is waiting, Commander." They saw Mirek executed. They saw our strike erase a Dominion ship. They'll want to know if we've just started a war. Dallin stepped forward, the weight of decision pressing on his shoulders. His hands clenched behind his back, nails biting into skin. "They need to hear one thing," he said, "that humanity negotiated tonight not with pleas, but with orbital fire." And the Dominion retreated. The message went out. Broadcast replayed the footage of Jonas Mirek's death, then the images of envoys bloodied but alive being pulled from the shuttles. The final sequence showed the Dominion cruiser, burning and crippled, dragged into Jupiter's gravity well. Across Earth, civilians filled streets, their cries mixing grief and fury. To them, Mirek had become a martyr, an arid, a legend whispered already as the man who held a corridor so others could walk free. On the Dominion side, the Council convened in secret. Reports streamed in of supply depots destroyed, fleets scrambling to reroute. Their overseer had failed, humiliated in public view, his threats collapsing under Earth's retaliation. Internal whispers spread like cracks through stone. Humanity had proven itself ungovernable, capable of inflicting scars far deeper than their size suggested. By dawn, the Council issued the only decree they could. Earth would be treated as sovereign, its territory marked as off-limits to further Dominion aggression. In the bunker, Dallin received confirmation. He listened in silence, his eyes cold but unreadable. Tovin broke it first, his voice low. "You force their hand." For the first time, they back away. Dallin turned toward him, his face carved with exhaustion, his tone carrying the weight of everything lost. "Not forced, taught. They believed hostages broke us. They believed dominance made us obedient. Tonight they learned different." Tovin's eyes burned as he whispered, "At the cost of men we'll never see again." Dalen's voice did not waver. "That cost is why the lesson holds. Every Dominion commander will remember that their weapons weren't enough to silence us. Our dead turned the battlefield into negotiation, and we answered." The bunker fell silent, the only sounds the clicks of cooling systems and the quiet rustle of men shifting in their seats. Each man carried his own grief, but beneath it lay something harder, the knowledge that they had carved survival with their own hands. Hours later, the surviving shuttles touched down. Envoys were carried off on stretchers, Marines stumbling after them, armor dented, faces streaked with soot and blood. Corin Vey staggered onto the ramp, eyes scanning the runway until he spotted Dalen waiting. Their gazes met. Neither saluted, neither spoke of victory. Vey rasped, voice hollow but steady. "We brought them home." Dalen nodded once. "And the overseer left in ruin." The envoys would heal slowly, their scars permanent reminders of captivity. Families would mourn those who never returned. Soldiers would whisper the names of Arid and the others into the silence of barracks at night. But across Earth and beyond, the image had already spread. Humanity was not prey, not a world to be tamed. It was a species that struck back when cornered, that fought wars not by numbers or technology, but by turning every threat into an opening. Days later, Dallin stood before the Planetary Council. The chamber was packed, air heavy with expectation. He faced them, his voice carrying across the hall without amplification. "The Dominion thought they could negotiate with blades at our throats. We answered with steel falling from orbit. They thought hostages would silence us. We spoke louder. And now, for the first time, they stepped back." The chamber erupted in thunderous applause, though Dallin did not smile. His eyes scanned the delegates, pausing where Jonas Mirek's empty seat remained. His voice softened, but its strength did not fade. "Our path is not without grief. But tonight proves one truth. Earth does not beg. We negotiate with fire, and the galaxy listens outside. News feeds replayed his words, carrying them across colonies and outposts. Among alien observers, whispers grew into unease. Dominion allies reconsidered alliances. Smaller powers reconsidered defiance. Humanity had shifted the balance not by pleading for mercy, but by rewriting the rules of negotiation itself. Rook Dallin left the chamber without celebration. He carried the names of every man lost, each step weighted with memory. Yet as he walked into the cold night air, the sky above Earth glittered with countless stars, each one a reminder of what waited beyond. He whispered under his breath, not for the council, not for history, but for the men who had fallen unseen. They will remember you, and across the galaxy they already did. If this story gripped you, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more cinematic HFY tales where humanity turns the tables on impossible odds. Now we want to hear from you. If you had command of Earth's orbital strike arsenal, which enemy fleet would you target first to change the course of war? Drop your answer in the comments. We go through every single one. Thanks for watching Stellar HFY, where humanity proves that negotiations mean nothing until fire speaks from the sky. See you in the next story.